Hey everyone, Jérôme Bérubé here for Scouting Session, episode number 22. And as always, I'm joined by Brad Allen. Hey Brad, how's it going?
I'm emotionally devastated. George Foreman passed away. Okay. We lost the best comeback sports story in history. If you're not a boxing fan, it doesn't matter. Go look up George Foreman, find out what the psychological makeup of that dude, apply it to hockey. You'll find the best prospect ever. That dude was incredible.
All right. And for this week episode, we got a special guest once again this week, our US scout, Christian Litscher. Christian, how's it going?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Jerome.
All right. For this week episode, it's gonna be about prospect from the USA. Mainly, we're gonna touch on the NCAA tournament, and there's 3 draft eligible prospects that are going to play in the tournament. So before we get to those 3 guys, and there's also going to be a fourth player from the USHL and high school rank from Minnesota. We're going to touch briefly on the NCAA tournament, and we are going to just share here the bracket for the tournament. So, Christian, I know you know those teams a bit more than me and Brad. Maybe your overall look at the bracket here. Who for you are the team to watch? And obviously, Boston College is probably the favorite with Michigan State. But what do you think about this bracket and some of the interesting matchup we could see in the tournament? That starts. We're recording Wednesday night, so it starts tomorrow, Thursday. So maybe your brief outlook on this bracket.
Yeah, we got another good tournament. I would second your thoughts. We got Boston College and Michigan State are for me the 2 favorites. I think for most people, Boston College they have the most skill, but Michigan State, I think top to bottom, is probably the best team. They come at you with 4 lines. They just play really hard grind hockey, just really wear you down. They got a pretty big mobile defense group, and they have a really good goalie too. So they're just a really hard team to play against. That would be my pick. But when it's one and done, and anything can happen. Matchup wise, I like the 8-9 Providence Denver. I think that's going to be an interesting one. Providence, they've always played with a lot of structure, but they got 2 freshmen, Trevor Connolly and John Mustard, who were pretty high picks last year. So they got a little bit more skill than they've had. So, they're going to be a tough out, and Denver, they're the defending champions. So that's going to be, I think, a good one. And maybe another team to watch would be Minnesota. They got a really good top 9, a lot of scoring depth there. So should be another great tournament.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. I think I'm assuming Boston College will beat Bentley, but if Denver does beat Providence, that's second round matchup. Boston College, Denver. That was the final last year, and a few guys on Boston College, they came back just for that. They came back. They could have turned pro, and they came back. Like Ryan Leonard was one who was pretty vocal about it, and Jacob Fowler also in net. They came back to win a national championship, but they had some up and down this season. Even though they're the number 1 seed, they didn't win the Beanpot. They didn't win. They did not win Hockey East. So I think it's going to be interesting. And also another second round matchup that could be interesting is Boston U versus Michigan State. That could be interesting too. So I'm with you. I think Boston College and Michigan State could be my final, but there's always a surprise in those type of 1-game elimination tournaments. So that should be interesting. It's always great hockey. So I'm looking forward to that. Maybe, and I mentioned we have 3 draft eligible player playing in this tournament. So we just talk about Boston College. So let's start with Boston College, guys, with James Hagens, who obviously has been well known on the scouting industry for a few years now. Freshman at Boston College this season. Maybe Brad, I'll start with you. Maybe your overall look at Hagens this season, and your I guess your updated view on this player.
For sure. Perennial top 3 pick going into the season. As the season progressed, for me, I think he's starting to stagnate. I don't think he has developed at the rate that was expected going into the year. But it's tricky because he's in college, and, not everybody can be, I always beat up on this kid, but he's a fantastic young player. So I want to give him more props. Adam Fantilli, he's not as dynamic as Fantilli. He's not as complete as Celebrini. He's just not in those tier ranges. So I think we, as a group here, might have expected a bit more than what he's given. That doesn't mean he isn't a very good prospect, though, and it doesn't mean he doesn't still have considerable upside. I mean, he still looks to me like a second line center. Neutral zone driving possession rates should be impressive. Power play specialist for sure. Jerome, I know that you mentioned Clayton Keller. I think that's a pretty good comp in terms of like production, output, kind of how he operates. There's definitely some similarities there. So I think that's a good comparison by you. I think it's one of those situations, like I mentioned this to Christian, just for our audience off air, which is that he's different than Matty Beniers. He's more talented than Matty Beniers. But I always was uncomfortable with Beniers being a top-end pick. I just thought there was, obviously he had such a high floor, so you understand from that perspective, but the ceiling was more limited. Hagens has a higher ceiling, but I get the same feeling that there's, in a redraft here, at least 5, 6, 7 players that are going to beat out Hagens based off of what we're seeing in terms of his development arc. I could be wrong, but that's my current update on him. I wish he was more consistent with his secondary skill set. Like sometimes he'll ramp up his physicality and it's fantastic to see, but then there's times where he's kind of floating around a little bit. His pace dips down. It's like with Cullen Potter, for instance. The one thing with Potter, you always give him the pace, right? He's always at a very high octane motor pace. He's got all of it. Hagens, not as consistent with that aspect of his game. The skating's not great. I think that's one of the big issues I have, is that he's not a dynamic skater. I think that will hamper his playmaking rates to some degree. We'll figure it out by the end of the season, but still a top-end prospect, still a very good prospect. But I think he is falling a little bit, and that there's other more dynamic players that are really starting to solidify themselves, like Michael Misa, for instance, that I think really beat him out.
Christian?
Yeah, I think he's disappointed a lot of people this year with, at least with the production. I think he would have expected, coming into the year, I would have said probably like 50 points would have been maybe where he'd be at, and I think he's in the 30s right now. But still, for me, I think he still projects. I think he's still top 6 all day, like a top 6 forward in the NHL all day. I think, like, when you look at the NTDP, a lot of the offense went through him. He was predominantly with Teddy Stiga and Brody Zemer last year, who are good prospects, but they're more support players. This year, he's been with a lot of different combinations, but most games he's been with Gabe Perreault and Ryan Leonard. So it's just been a completely different situation. Last year, everything went, for the most part, all the offense went through him, and he created a lot of offense off the rush. Like, a lot of his offense, a lot of his points last year came off the rush. Where you're playing with the NTDP, you play all kinds of teams, but like a lot of junior, like either international U18 teams or USHL teams, where you get a lot more of those like 2-on-1, 3-on-2 opportunities, and that's where Hagens was really money. Like, he thinks the game well. He thinks the game like a high-end skill player, and he has the skill to make those plays. So when you give him like grade A opportunities, he can make you pay. Where college, when teams play with a lot more structure, it's a lot harder to. You're just not getting as many of those type of opportunities. And what I was saying with Perreault and Leonard, he's been more. I don't want to say support piece, but like less of a driver than he has been at the NTDP. And I think that's a fair question for, projection. Like, can he drive a line in the NHL? I think that's a fair question to ask. Brad, I'm completely with you with the skating. I think that's the weakest part of his game. I think like his skill is the best part. I think the skating is the weakest part. I think you could compare him to Logan Cooley, to two of the former NTDP players, Logan Cooley and Will Smith. I think he's sort of in between them. I think Cooley was the best skater of the group. I think Will Smith was probably the most skilled. For me, he had the best high-end skill of the group. Hagens is somewhere in between them. He's a better skater than Smith, but he's not quite as skilled. I think Cooley is very skilled. Don't get me wrong. I think he's maybe got a slightly better, just pure raw skill than Cooley. A little bit less of, or a less dynamic skater, and a little bit. Cooley was a more competitive player, so I think he's kind of in between those two guys. But still, for me, I mean, I think he's top 6 all day. Maybe ideally, if you're building like a contender, ideally he slots in as a second line center. But I think he could be one of those guys that, if he hits a ceiling on a fair amount of teams, he's still like he'd be a top line guy, a power play one type of guy.
Yeah, I think for me, my take on him this year was as much as Ryan Leonard and Gabe Perreault are awesome, I always felt like there was some disconnecting between those three as a line. Almost felt like Perreault and Leonard were really great together, and then you had Hagens on the side who was trying to figure out how to play with them and try to contribute with them. Also playing with a lot of pressure, being his draft year. Also be the guy who replaced Will Smith on that line. So like the Smith, Perreault, Leonard line, they play like 3 straight year together. So and probably the fit was probably not as great as a lot of people anticipated for that line this season. He's still a point per game player as a freshman in college, so it's not too bad. But it's a bit of a hot take, but I think we all agree. I think Hagens will be a better player away from those two players. I think he's going to be able to I think at the NHL level, if you draft him in the top 5, top 6, top 7, you think of him as your probably the number one option on his line, as the guy who will drive the play more at the NHL level as the number one option. So that's a bit of the bet you're going to make if you draft him. And yeah, like the play driving this year has been a bit of a letdown by him. He is going to be, I'm probably projecting him as a number 2 center at the NHL level. My first few viewing of him this year, my first thought in my head was like, I think his defense is better than what people give him credit, but I think his offense is probably not as good as what people project him to be, because the projection was a number 1 elite center at the start of the year by a lot of people, and I didn't really see that. I didn't really see that last year too. Like I had Frundell above him last year for most of the year until Frundell got hurt, and and then Hagens at 20+ point at the U18. But I always felt like Frundell was above him on my really early list. So, but I feel like I said, I think he's probably. I have a hard time imagining him as a number 1 center at the NHL level, like a true number 1 center. I don't see that, but I feel like he's gonna. I don't know what his plans are for next season. I assume he would go back to college for 1 more year. I think that would be probably a good decision by him, and just really dominate. If you can see if you can see him dominate NCAA next season, that would be a really great sophomore season for him. And then I think he'd be fully ready for the NHL after that season. So and like you guys said, the skating is a bit, for a 5'11" center, that's a bit of a question mark. And I think that that lack of skating probably does help project him more as a number 2 center. Because if he was really a dynamic skater like Logan Cooley was in his draft year, I think you have more people projecting him as a number 1 center. But with that skating right now and that size, and also the compete level, the play driving, sometimes being up and down, there's a lot of things here that are leading me to project him more as a number 2 center than number 1 center. So those were my takes on James Hagens. But we'll keep watching. We have more games to watch, and we can go back and watch game from past few weeks also. But one thing I'll say about talking about his compete level, the last game that he played, that was against Northeastern. That was probably the most physical game that I saw him play this season. I think he had like 6 or 7 hits in the game. If we can see more of that, that's really going to help him at the NHL level. And because a lot of games, mostly in the first half, I felt like he was really passive, almost like was playing with Leonard and Perreault, and just almost like letting those guys do the heavy lifting. Hopefully that's something that change next season, because obviously Leonard and Perreault should be in the NHL next season. Anyway, we'll move on to the second player that is playing in this tournament. This one is playing for Michigan State. Brad, you can start with him. Shane Vansaghi, big power forward, really physical player. Brad, let you give your take on this prospect.
Sure. My comparison for him has been Dmitry Voronkov, and as the season has progressed, I feel it's more and more accurate. Not as big as Voronkov, which is, the issue is 6'5", that would help. But Voronkov in his initial draft season, horrible skater, very janky, skate with a piano on his back, but a smart player with some raw skill elements, and it's come together for him in Columbus. I feel like Vansaghi kind of fits the very similar mold. He's one of those space creators that's extremely unique, because he can make space by using his frame, charging shoulder first into oncoming traffic, while simultaneously being able to find trailing options. So he can process in a way where he can use his physicality and his playmaking simultaneously. That is an incredibly useful combination to have when it comes to his skill set and how he can translate. He's also like one of the most competitive, hardest hitting players in this draft class. And although the skating is janky and not the prettiest thing to look at, I think his A to B, when you look at him long-term and project him out, will be fine. We were talking a bit off air about this, but yeah, every time he plays Notre Dame, I feel like he's a superstar. I'm a bit biased here because my last few weeks have been him versus Notre Dame. But I think there's actually like a decent amount of dual threat here. Like his shot is actually pretty good too. And, it's one of those situations where his minutes are not a lot either. It's not like he's playing a ton. He's kind of playing as a role player, which, he does project as an NHL player. But I feel like this player would get a lot more hype if he was playing the junior ranks. Like if he was playing in the WHL, for instance, like I think people would see a lot more skill than they expect. And I really like him. I'm a huge fan of Vansaghi. I think there's a lot there.
Christian?
Yeah. I would echo a lot of what Brad said. He's just a horse. He's a true power forward, but what I like about him is he's got the mentality of a grinder, but I mean that like in a positive way. Like the motor just never stops. He's always out there hunting. He finishes every hit. Like the physicality is what you really like, but he's got a pretty good stick too. He can get stick on puck when he's forechecking. But like when he hits you hard. He can put you in the second row. Like he's probably in terms of like the force of his hit, it's the best in my area. He can really make an impact physically. Just like the type of player that opposing defensemen just hate to play against. He's just going to wear you down and make your life hard. But he's not like, I agree with Brad where like I don't see him as just like a bruiser grinder either or fourth liner either. Like there is some untapped skill here. I like his shooting better. I think Brad likes his playmaking better. I'm putting words in your mouth, but I like his shooting a bit better. I think his release is very good. I think like he can fill the net. He can score. A lot of his best moments, I think, have come like what I don't like about him is he relies too much on power moves to the outside. So like a lot of his offenses he's coming down like the left side on his offhand. He'll make a 2-to-1 power move or just power move to the outside. If he can get the outside, if he can turn the defender, then that opens up a lot for him. Then like you see the vision, and then you see like where he can make plays. And if there's someone open, he can hit them. If there's not, he can just take the puck to the net. But where it falls apart a little bit for me is when that doesn't work, then like he can be, I don't want to say tunnel vision, but he can kind of force himself into areas and turn the puck over more than you would like to see. So like that's for me, like I think the skating, completely agree with Brad that's going to be what, like his first couple steps are like the big weakness with his skating. That's going to be what probably the biggest area of emphasis is, just to improve those his short area quickness, small area quickness. Like once he gets going at full speed, he can skate. It's just like getting up to speed is what's going to have to improve. And I think in the NHL, like you either need the small area quickness or you need the size. So at least he has the size to fall back on. Like he can, he's just a load to contain for defenders. So he can use his frame to get to the quote unquote dangerous areas of the ice. He can use his frame to get to the net. Yeah, like the offense, it's not great, but I think it's a lot due to like his role. Like Brad said, he doesn't play a lot. He was a fourth liner with the NTDP. He's a fourth liner at Michigan State, so he's not getting prime minutes. And also his play style. I mean, he's just like he's out there. It's 100% every shift. He really he doesn't take too many shifts off. So when you're going like that, it's hard to be as consistent offensively when that's kind of where you are in the lineup and your role on the team. But he does PK, he does play power play, so he's getting the special teams time. And I see him like down the road in the NHL. Like I think regular season there'll probably be guys that produce more. I mean, of course, but like even like where he goes in the draft, there might be guys after him that get picked after him that produce more. But I think come playoff time, like Vansaghi is going to be the one you want on your team. He's going to be the guy. Playoff time, he's going to be a very impactful player. He's just made the play in the playoffs, I think, in those like high intensity, more physical games. I think he'll be a great player there. The projection, like I said, he was a fourth liner in TDP, fourth liner in the NCAA. So I don't think you can find too many type of guys like that were like a fourth liner coming up the ranks, but then end up more than that in the pros. But Vansaghi could be one of those guys because I think there is a lot of untapped offense here, and with a bigger role, he could be more. That's where I'm wondering what happens to him in the future because if I'm not mistaken, all three of the right wingers on Michigan State I think are eligible to come back, and then they have Riker Lee, who's probably the most skilled player in the USHL coming in too. So there'll be some competition, but you would think he can. Vansaghi should be able to work his way up. But all in all, I just think like you can find more skilled guys. You can find guys with better production, of course. But I think like the total package here of the compete and the physicality, it's really hard to find guys like this. So I think Vansaghi could be a very valuable player for whoever drafts him.
Yeah, I think if you draft him and you get like a grinder, whether he plays on your third, fourth line doesn't matter. Like a lot of times now in the NHL, like the third and fourth line are pretty similar. So you can move around those two lines, and if you get him and he gets you 10 goals, 20 points, and then he's a monster in the playoff, I think you're happy with that selection. And maybe he has a bit more upside than this. If everything goes right. I like his shot. I think his hands are pretty underrated. Like I've seen him, pull some pretty good one-on-one moves. I saw more playmaking out of him in the first half of the season. My viewing of him in the second half, I have not seen a ton of like good playmaking from him. And obviously he's playing like 10, 11, 12 minutes per game. So, and he's also not playing with amazing players on his line. Like he's playing with fourth liners for the most part. So he's an interesting guy. I think there's a chance that he could go late first. But if he's a second round pick in this year draft, I think he'd be a really good pick for any team. So let's move on. We'll go back to Boston, but this time Boston University with freshman defenseman Sascha Boumedienne from Sweden, a true 17 years old playing college hockey. Um, my From watching him last year a bit in the USHL and then with Sweden in different tournaments, I was really surprised when I heard he was going to play full time, college hockey this season. And I think I was proven right because the first half of the season was not super good for him. But he has made some good stride in the second half of the season. He's looking more and more like a good future NHL draft picks, depending if it's more in the top 32 or outside of the top 32. But he looks more and more like a future good player. And the improvement is good. It's good to see. It's a bit, honestly, it's like the opposite of last year. Last year started really strong with Youngstown, and then really kind of like I don't want to say collapse, but really struggled in the second half of the season. So that's good to see by him that he's making progress. Honestly, the Elinka tournament in August, he was not really good in that tournament. So I was like, wow, this kid is struggling at the Elinka, and now he's off to college. That's a big step up, but I'm pretty happy to see the stride that he has made. I see the skating is going to be quite good for him. I think he can move pucks, but he still does struggle under pressure at times. But mostly, I think defensively and also physically, that's the biggest improvement that I've seen from him. He's a lot more tenacious now that he was maybe in October or November. So that's a bit my view on this player and how much he has improved, because I didn't really have much time for him early on in the year. Like the potential was there, but I didn't really like the way he was playing. But man, those freshmen player in college are really tricky sometimes because they might struggle. Not everyone is Celebrini or Fantilli or Jai Kaiko. So you have to keep watching them, and this player has made some good progress in the second half. So we can't have him as low as maybe we had him early on this season. So Brad, maybe give your 2 cents on Boumedienne.
Sure. I'll say this about all three players we talked about. I think they all would have been better off in junior, including Hagens. I think Hagens would have had a better year if he was not in college. That said, Boumedienne, so the huge thing with Boumedienne that Jérôme talked about for everybody is like the development curve is in the right direction. Pace of play is ramped up. Defensive responsibility is ramped up. Attention to detail is ramped up. And he looks much more like a minute-eating, puck-moving defenseman that actually can hold. One of the things we have to be cognizant of as a group is the fact that I really think minute-eating puck movers are kind of a dying breed. We got to be careful that not many of them are going to make it in the new NHL. You got dynamic offensive defensemen, gigantic, towering, specialized shutdown defensemen, insulators. Then you usually, if you're going to have another player, it's going to have to be a 200-foot player who can do everything at both ends of the ice and dominate all three zones. And Boumedienne is definitely not going to be an offensive minded defenseman and does not project to be a point producer. So from that perspective, there's a bit of risk here. But I like the raw base. I think he's a very good skater. The skating's really coming around. I think there's another gear entirely next season that we're going to see from him that really helps with the projection. And I think he's improved with his decision-making under pressure considerably. I think he's a much more comfortable player in college in the second half relative to the first half. Definitely limited offensively, though. So again, where we ultimately place him, it's going to really depend on how many of these more dynamic defensemen we think can actually play relative to him. But certainly heading in the right direction. Where are you on him, Christian?
Yeah, I would second a lot of what you guys said. When I first saw him play at the USHL Fall Classic, which would have been September 2023, I thought he was going to be a first-round pick for sure. Like I thought he, for a 16-year-old in the USHL, I thought he really jumped off the page, so to speak. Like he was, his one-timer was electric. Like he was making plays at the blue line, running the power play. I thought he looked really, really good. And then when his first game in the NCAA, it was the complete opposite, where it's like, ooh, I don't know how the season's going to go for him. He was really, really struggling. Just wasn't very clearly wasn't physically ready for the NCAA. So I've kind of been all over the place on him. I agree. He's gotten a lot better as the season's gone on. Like in puck battles early in the season, he won't even really pretend to even want the puck. Like if any 50-50 puck or any puck battle, he was probably not going to come out with the puck. Now he's more competitive. Like he's never going to be like a big net clearing front guy. He's never going to be like a guy that's hard to play against in the corners. But that area of his game has at least improved over the course of the season. And he's playing with a lot more confidence too. You're starting to see some of the skill that he showed in the USHL, where early on, like I said, early on he was pretty bad. I think we all agree. But then even for a while, it just felt like he was treading water. Like maybe December, January, maybe the bean pot is when it started to turn around for the better. But he was really just he would do, what he would have, try to play his mistake, try to do what he could do to not hurt the team, basically. He was just treading water, less mistakes, becoming more competitive, but still wasn't making a great impact positively on the game. And now we've seen he's the last month, maybe 2 months, you're starting to see more of the skill. So he's got great hands from the blue line. He's got a good shot. He's got a good release. There are a lot of elements here for him that he has going for him. We just haven't really seen it as much until now. But another thing, he's not getting power play time. So next year, I would think Tom Willander probably turns pro. So Boumedienne probably gets some power play time with BU. So you'll probably see the stats next year. I would think would take a big jump. What else can I say? And yeah, the 17-year-old in the NCAA, there's no comps that you can look at. You have Werenski, you have Hannafin. I mean, both those guys were top 10 studs. Those guys were surefire NHLers. Boumedienne's not that. So it's hard to look at historical comps. But I do think I agree. If he was playing junior, I was thinking if he played with the NTDP, I think we'd be talking way more positive about him than we are with BU. So I think there is skill here. It's just what you have to wait is how much he's playing in the NCAA and how much that impacts him. I think we'll probably see 2 more years at BU. I think he'll need 2 more years, but I think you're hoping by the junior year he's an impact NCAA player if he's trending well. I still have some reservations with the hockey sense. He can still be fairly giveaway prone. He still struggles under pressure, like Jerome said. So that's where I'm hesitant on him. But I do like the skating, and I do think there's some skill here where maybe he could be. He's not going to be a PP power play one guy in the NHL, but I think he could provide secondary offense. So yeah, a tough player to figure out, but he does have a lot of good attributes still.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the last player we're going to talk about. So the first 3 players we mentioned are playing in the NCAA tournament. So the last one is Mason West, who plays for Fargo in the USHL, but he came from Edina High School in Minnesota. Big 6'6", 210-pound center slash right winger. Very interesting player and pretty incredible athlete. If you watch him play, watch him skate. That's like his skating is pretty good for. I mean, good. That's I would say pretty great for a 6'6", 17 years old player. So he's starting to play in the USHL, which is really helping us, to be honest. A lot easier to project him, or you know, I just don't like watching high school hockey, to be honest. So it's a lot easier watching him in the USHL. Interesting storyline about him is that he might not play hockey after this season. So he's a two-sport athlete, a bit like Anders Lee of the New York Islanders. So he's a quarterback in football. He has Division One offer to play football. So from what I read, he's going to make a decision before the NHL draft combine. So we'll see if he chooses hockey or not. But like we'll talk about him as he would choose hockey. And Brad, maybe I'll start with you. You watch him in both high school and USHL. A bit, what's your take on him so far? After he has joined the USHL for, I think he has played 7 or 8 games so far. So we're starting to get some decent viewings on him.
Well, I think he's the opposite of Scott Morrow. Scott Morrow was a stud in high school, and then I thought he was bad in the USHL, and we dropped him, and now we'll see what happens. But this player, high school, like this is the huge thing. This is what we got to discuss here, is that when it comes down to like ranking philosophy, if you have a kid who doesn't dominate high school, you got to be unbelievably careful. Like this kid did not dominate high school in my viewings, at least, and that usually means 7th round pick. That usually means like less than 1% probability of playing. And then if you try to project him out of high school, which you got to do, it's like where would he be production wise if he was in the USHL theoretically? Well, now it's not so theoretical. You get to watch him, but I thought he'd be under point per game. So if you're talking about a player that's going to be under point per game in their initial draft season in the USHL and didn't dominate high school, you're talking about a 7th rounder all day. However, this player has looked way better in the USHL than I think we expected out of the gate here. And then to what Jérôme just mentioned, this is a dual athlete who is not completely committed to hockey. So the question then becomes, what happens when he actually does fully commit? How much more runway are we getting in terms of his talent level and his execution rates going up? And we've already seen, again, improvement in that area. In high school, in my viewings, we talked about this off air, Christian, but Carl Hagelin, I talked about Carl Hagelin and how Carl Hagelin has hands of stone. Well, one of the reasons that I think it was comparable is because this kid completed maybe one handling play successfully in motion out of like 20 attempts in my viewing. So his hands weren't holding, and then his playmaking under pressure wasn't holding, and especially on his backhand, which really matters for this player, because one of the beautiful things about being a 6'5" kid is that he has the length to be able to pull pucks around players and carve on his backhand. But that doesn't mean much if you can't pass on your backhand. So there was definitely limitations. That doesn't even get to the shot. The shot was all over the map. His spectrum outcomes with his shot were a very wide range. Sometimes you look at his release and you're like, oh, there it is. And then you get 6, 7 shots in a row, they look like muffins. You're like, this is not going to hold. So I'm very happy he came in the USHL. It's really given us a much better understanding of what the player, I think, can project to be, which I think is a depth, like super athlete who just flies in transition and offers secondary playmaking upside and looks like a potential power playmaker down the road. One thing I really like about his game is that I think he's thinking about hockey from a contextual point of view about how his physical makeup can help challenge opposing players. And what I mean by that is, like, if you look at how he interacts with opposing players, one thing, Jérôme, we watched this together, is that he reverse hip checks into opposing players to give himself leverage advantages off the wall so he can take advantage of his length. That's something you typically wouldn't think about if you're a kid who's on his way out of hockey. That's not. He's thinking about the game. So I hope he holds. I hope he decides to go with hockey, because he certainly looks like a very unique player.
Christian?
Yeah, I was second. I love that. I think he's adjusted well to the USHL. He hasn't been dominant, but I think he's shown well. Like the USHL games have definitely helped him. I first saw him. I was the high school hockey tournament. And I was wondering, like, okay, this guy's a football player. Like, what's this guy all about? And then I was very pleasantly surprised with what I was seeing. Like, I really liked his compete. Like, I wasn't really expecting that. I thought he was really smart. So he wasn't really what I was expecting going in. And like, yeah, he just pops off the screen because of the size and skating. He's a great skater. He's got good speed, but also for a big guy, like his first couple steps are really good. So you don't, like a lot of bigger players like that, like they can get up this, or they can when they're at speed, they're fairly fast, but just getting there is the problem for him. Like his first couple steps are pretty good. I like his vision. I think he can find the open man. He's good at using the width of the rink, like cross seam. Can use like good at like delays and like waiting for teammates. And even on like plays that don't connect, like you can see what the thought process was. So I think he does think the game well. He's not like he's 6'5", but he's not like I wouldn't call him intimidating. Like he'll finish hits, but he's not mean, or doesn't appear to be mean at least. He's not like intimidating, I don't think, to play against. But the big, like from what I've seen, like I've seen Hagens play for 3 years now. I've seen West play for a month. The first time I saw him play was like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I don't know his game quite as well, but from what I've seen, the finishing ability seems to be like the biggest weakness. So I haven't. He scored 1 goal. That was a pretty nice shot, but I would second exactly what Brad said. Like a lot of muffins, a lot of just throwing pucks on net that really have no chance to go in. So like that's where I question. Like he's got good attributes, but like does he have the actual skill to play like in any type of scoring role? Like I don't know about that. He's still. We'll see what he can do in the USHL. Like he's still adjusting. He still has some games left, but like so far that appears to be the weakness of his game. But even if he's not a finisher, which he doesn't seem to be, like he still can create space for his line mates with his size and speed. Still looks like someone that could play in a bottom 6. And yeah, I mean, the obvious question is also like if he focuses 100% on hockey, then how far can he go? So very interesting player. Looks to me like someone that will get drafted in the top 100, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. Still some games to go with Fargo.
Yeah, I think he's gonna go pretty high in the draft. Just, I mean, if he does commit to hockey, I think a team will just take the bet. They'll draft the athlete, and they're gonna have a lot of years to work with him. I don't know if I was him, I'd probably play a full year in the USHL next season. I'm assuming as a Minnesota guy, you would probably commit to the Gophers at University of Minnesota. That would be what I think might happen. But I don't know if he's ready to play on the top program like this right away. Kind of like Dean Letourneau's situation last year, where he went to Boston College and he's not really playing that much for them. So maybe a year in the USHL would have been really good for Letourneau, and I think Mason West could use that an extra year in the USHL, and then going to college right after that. I do like. I like his effort level away from the puck. Like I've seen him, like often really at least at the USHL level, like really good back check presence by him. So maybe that kid is not going to score a lot, but I think he could provide some really good energy and speed on your bottom 6. Off air, we're like talking about some player comp for him, and there's not many guys that actually looks like him at the NHL level. And Christian did find one guy that might, be somewhat similar from the St. Louis Blues. Alexei Toropchenko was maybe probably the best comp we could find of him. So an interesting player. I think I saw the Central Scouting has him as a A-rated player now. Um, that was a big shocker to me when I saw that. I think I'm okay with it as a B-rated player. I can see that, but I don't know how many A do they have, because we don't have that many A on our list this season, and he's definitely not one, not one of them. So um, anyway, that he's going to be an interesting player to follow, and it's a great story. I'm a huge fan of like athlete playing two sports. It's really good for them. I hate seeing like younger hockey players playing hockey 11 months a year for from age 7 to like until the draft. A lot of times those kids they get burned out by one sport. So I think in one interview he did say that he learned some of the physical aspect of the game in hockey because he played football. That and also I'm assuming the IQ is pretty good. As a quarterback, you have to know what's going on. So I'm assuming the IQ is translating to hockey, and we kind of saw it with his playmaking. Like his playmaking is pretty solid. As Brad mentioned, though, his playmaking on his backhand will need to get better. Um, but he's pretty raw. So, and I think if you draft him, it's a 4 or 5 year project you're getting here. So, you're gonna have to be patient. But maybe in 5 6 years, this guy comes in and plays awesome for you on your bottom six, playoff value as well. So, and the skating is pretty great. The crossover are pretty unreal at that size and that age. Like we don't see that every day. A guy who can skate like that. So anyway, that's a bit of what we have on Mason West. That's gonna wrap up this week episode. Christian, thanks a lot for joining us this week. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure to have you on. And Brad
Yeah, thanks for having me,
also,
guys. It was
yeah,
great.
and Brad also, thank you again you for being here with me this week. So we'll be back next week for another episode. Until then, see you guys and enjoy the NCAA hockey tournament. It should be some great hockey over the next week or two. So some pretty interesting matchups. So enjoy the hockey, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Take care, everybody.